board.
So I'm doing 10.
Okay, I think we're ready. So, welcome to the February 8th, 2024 Conservation Commission meeting. And we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, Sue, if you could do roll call.
All right. Present this evening, Ellen Snyder.
Here.
Melissa Sharples.
Here.
Sam Kenny.
Here.
Tom Jones.
Here.
Colin Lawson.
Here.
Jessica Kahn. David Bell.
Here.
Juliana Tyson. Here. Jeff Goldnall.
Present.
Absent Chris Claxton.
Okay, so I...
Oh, I forgot to call Brian's name.
I'm here.
Hi, Brian. We see you. All right, so we have one full member missing, so I think I'll appoint Jessica as a voting member tonight. All right,
Who, Tom? No, Jessica.
Jessica. Okay, so moving along, public comment. I think everybody here is speaking later, so I don't see anybody for public comment. All right, so we have the December 14th, 2023 meeting minutes to approve. Any edits? Motion to approve as written. Tom, second? Oh, wait, sorry, you guys aren't voting, all right. Sorry, you guys aren't voting. Somebody else. Sorry, you guys, scratch that.
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you. Second? Sam? All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you. That's right, I did too. So quickly, we forget. All right, financial summary. Okay, for the Conservation Fund, we have $134,868.84. The Shanda Fund has $4,621.11 for a total of $139,489.95. We got interest, and I don't think we had anything else happen during this past month. Oh, not? Yeah, I have something, but I'll bring that up later on under a property. Okay, the general fund balance is $2,123.95. We had expenses for part-time salary, and actually we did pay out the CELT monitoring contract. So both of those occurred last month, and that's why the balance is that. Any questions on the finances? Ready? Moving along, all right. Master plan update. So we will have Bart and Autumn, and we have two guests, so I'll let Bart perhaps lead us on from here.
Good evening, everyone. Bart McDonough, Planning Director. Tonight I should say, we're going to just give you a quick update on our progress with the open space chapter, or natural resources, or now that we're calling it land and water conservation. We'll get into that a little later. And afterwards, we're going to do a presentation from Lynn Vaccaro and Emin Tutin on checklists. So you got a bunch of checklists in front of you from 3 different communities. So we're going to start that process in developing Newmarkets. So they're going to help us with that discussion. So we're looking forward to that. And then afterwards, we're going to review the goals and strategies drafted already. Autumn's going to come in and help us through that. And afterwards, we'll talk about next steps. So with that, I will pass it on to Autumn. Unless anyone has questions at this point in time. Excellent. All right, Autumn, thank you.
Thanks, Bart. Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me again. So I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of where everything is at with the master plan right now. So this week, Angie met with the Arts, Culture, and Tourism Commission and kicked off the Arts, Culture, and Historic Resources chapter. So that's getting started. The housing chapter is on a similar timeline as the open space plan, and they should be finishing up in June, so they're moving swiftly forward. We're just waiting on some census data to come in and be analyzed for that. And of course, our workshop planned in the future. The Community Facilities and Utilities chapter will be led by my colleague Lisa Murphy, and that will begin this month. I'm going to be connecting with your town engineer, Lindsay, to join the March meeting of the Energy Commission and see how best to utilize the document that they've been drafting and how to summarize that into a master plan chapter. And then we'll also be kicking off the recreation chapter in the coming month or so. Bart and I will be meeting with Amy next week to talk about, her goals and vision for this, and then hopefully we'll figure out a good workflow for her to come together with the Conservation Commission and other folks in town, so as not to overwhelm you all with several chapters at once. So those are all the various things going on right now in the background. The survey just closed. We did achieve 400 respondents, so we're very excited about that. We're still analyzing it because it just closed this Monday. So at our next meeting, I'll have an update for you with more detailed analysis, but there are some really interesting outcomes I'm starting to see. One of the questions asked about increased protections via water regulations, and there's over 60% of the community strongly supports that, so that's really exciting. And a lot of folks actually had a high awareness of or had already visited several of the conservation areas that we listed, which was nice to see. So those are kind of my initial at-a-glance takeaways, but I'll have more for you soon.
So is that just Newmarket residents that were participating?
So we did have a question that asked if they're a resident, a business owner, a landowner, and broke down all of their relation to the town.
Yeah.
So we'll be able to analyze the questions based on that.
Great.
Yeah.
Are you going to talk about the March workshop?
Yes. Yep. So next, on March 16th, Saturday, we're going to be hosting a visioning, housing, and open space workshop. The project team has been working on outlining that agenda, and we have a lot of exciting activities. It's going to be sort of open house style, so a lot of programmed but choose your own adventure sort of activities. So we'll have that agenda probably finalized within the next week or so for you all to look at. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. It's not your average workshop, so it'll be very engaging, and we're hoping to also start off with breakfast and sort of cafe conversations to get everyone warmed up in the morning. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Ellen?
Are we going to talk about it again, or that's all we're going to talk? Because so this is our open house. This is the open space chapter open house as well as housing. So
Yes.
It's March 16th, it's a Saturday, and I think it would be helpful if as many of us can go as possible. And I don't know if we need to know that tonight, because we do meet again before that, right? Our meeting is before the 16th.
Yeah.
So we'll be able to.
Something I should ask, if there's anyone here interested in more of a facilitator role, or kind of helping guide folks around and support some of the activities, we definitely welcome that, and we can sort of bring you into the planning a little bit more.
So one of the things I talked to Bart about, since we've had several looks at the maps that Jackson's working on, and I think we'll get a new set at the next
week.
meeting, but if we could have, so it'll be before our next meeting, so it'll be before the workshop, but one of the thoughts I had was that we have those maps at the workshop,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
And so people can comment, can comment on the maps, but I think it would be helpful to break those up into sort of categories, and then have one or more of us at each of those stations. So if
Yeah.
that's something that people are willing to help with, I think would be helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. We had talked about having sort of gallery walks around the room of different maps, so I think that's a great idea, if we can kind of man those stations in case people have questions, because there's a lot of data there. So yeah, I'll shoot out a follow-up email to Ellen and sort of outline if you'd like to participate as a facilitator, or a little bit heavier role. then you can let me know, and we'll make sure that you're included in that planning. Yeah, of course. And yes, and then after that, the week of April 8th will be a virtual visioning week where we're hoping to attend the Riverfront Advisory Committee, the regular Master Plan Subcommittee meeting, Conservation Commission, and then Planning Board. And we'll have activities using Jamboard, if you're all familiar, or some similar like online whiteboard platform, and use activities in that way to engage people who attend online. And this is sort of to open it up to people who couldn't attend the March 16th workshop, so that everyone has an opportunity to add to the vision. And maybe we can get a little more details on open space, riverfront, downtown riverfront area, and then housing in those discussions.
Can I just say one more thing about
Yes.
planning? So at our March meeting, our Conservation Commission meeting, we're going to have Lauren White, who did the turtle research. And she's going to report on her research, in particular related to Ash Swamp Road, which is one of the areas that we're having issues with. And so I talked to Lindsay Butler, the engineer, and we thought that might be a good meeting for her to come to
Yeah.
as part of the open space plan, because that's her bailiwick. And so just wanted to let you know, if we do that in March, recreation should probably not be that month
Yeah.
if you're thinking something later.
Definitely, yeah. No, that makes sense. And I was just telling Bart, I'm gonna outline my plan for the next several months and sort of what I would like on the agendas, and then send to you to confirm. So, yeah, keep an eye out for that from me, because we do have a lot going on. So putting it on paper will help us plan it out easier. And yeah, so data and maps. We should have an updated, nearly finalized map set from Jackson next week when he's back from the Bahamas. Not to make anyone jealous, I definitely am. And then we will be meeting in March, again, like Ellen said. And there will be several communications in between now and then. So that's kind of the foundation. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask before I let Lynn and Emma come up? All right, thank you all. Lynn and Emma?
Do you want to say anything about why we're here first, Bart?
Yes, so Lynn and Eleanor, they helped us for, so kind of backtrack, reverse in time. Conservation Commission, Plan Department, we applied for Connect to Protect grant map, and they helped us, these maps in front of you, helped us develop Newmarket specific map. This data that is on the map right now, that's for all New Hampshire communities. It kind of signifies what lands that should be protected using a lot of different data sources. So like, you know, areas to like for wildlife preservation, agricultural land. So they kind of maps, you know, out where those locations are. So the idea for Newmarket, we want something a little more refined, I guess, to incorporate also trail networks. So kind of add in additional data sources to help us identify where are recreation opportunities, where are wildlife opportunities for preservation, and also you know, agricultural. So, so that's what the maps you have in front of you. So fast forward, we had those maps developed. Thank you so much. Pete Steckler helped us with those. Yeah, and Alan. And now, kind of like the second part of this is a conversation that the commission has been having itself is how do we identify, you know, all right, we got those lands, we got lands we want to protect, but how can we identify the best ones? So this is the development of a checklist. And there's different communities that have done this before, and with the help with Emma and Lynn. So there's 3 communities in front of you. We've got Rochester, we've got Dover, and I believe Chester. There's more as well. This has been developed, how many years you've been doing this for checklists? Yeah, I know, but the program in general, like people in general, it's like 10, 15
Yeah,
years?
10 years, but
Yeah.
people have been making these sort of formal checklists that we
Yeah.
share with folks, so maybe it goes back further than that.
Right.
But, yeah.
Yeah, so this is just a systematic approach based on the value, community, the commissions, what they want to protect. So, Ellen, am I missing anything?
No, just that I think, I don't know if you printed off the Newmarket 2002, the open space bond checklist.
Oh, I think I missed that one.
That's right, 'cause they got it in their
Yeah.
packet, so.
Yeah.
At least we had an open space bond back in 2002, and we had a pretty simplified checklist back
Yeah.
then, so.
Yeah.
It's, yeah.
So with that, so why we're here tonight is to help us with that process, start that process, identify, going like a real group thing, brainstorming session on, developing that checklist, what are the priorities, and then, moving on from there. So without further ado, to pass it over to Lynn and Emma to bring this forward. Is that good enough?
Yeah, no, perfect.
All right, good.
Just,
Just
maybe just quickly,
Yeah.
tell you who we are. I'm Lynn Vaccaro. I work with New Hampshire Fish and Game. I'm based at the Great Bay Discovery Center office, and I've met a few of you, but not all of you. Sean, I did the Great Bay Living Shorelines project. I interacted with you a little bit there. And this is Emma Tutine. Yep, Emma Tutine. I work for UNH Cooperative Extension. I'm the community conservation state specialist there, and so working with conservation commissions is a big part of my job, as well as with land trusts. And so I'm excited to continue helping Newmarket along the way here. And I used to live in Newmarket, so I also feel like I have a special spot in my heart for Newmarket as well. So yeah, do you want to just try to wing it without slides?
Oh,
yeah.
Just when you speak, one of them, you have to use the microphone just so you get picked up on
so
the.
it gets recorded.
Yeah. Thank you.
I guess I'll just start. If there's any questions about that map that's in front of you, it's a cool resource, and I'll just say really briefly, but it's basically part of a regional conservation plan for this area. A bunch of kind of the state and federal agencies and nonprofits got together and really wanted to kind of find what are the most kind of high value places to protect across the whole land area that drains to the New Hampshire coastline. So it's about 42 towns that are covered, Newmarket obviously, and it's really striking what you can see on that map, right? Those purple areas are the areas that popped out are really regionally significant places that are not currently protected but could be and are really high value places. And I'll just say it integrates a whole bunch of different criteria: wildlife, habitat, wildlife corridors, water protection, attenuating pollutants, providing buffer spaces, as well as for climate mitigation. So spaces where like salt marshes might migrate to as sea levels rise, or places that can absorb some of the floodwaters during extreme flood events. So it's a cool map, but it is based on kind of these regional priorities. And so Emma and I over the last couple of years have been part of a team that's out kind of talking to folks about this regional conservation plan and seeing how it could be used. And there's some advantages of having that as one more resource that you look at when you're thinking about conservation, in part because it's the exact same plan that all these different funders are using as well. So it's a great thing to reference when you're trying to kind of justify doing a land protection project. And it helps kind of, align everybody's goals potentially. But what we're also learning too is that, municipalities, you've got your own set of criteria that you probably want to apply when you're starting to think about where to protect and maybe where to put some public dollars towards land protection projects. And so that's where the checklist can come in. It allows you to kind of, maybe take some of these regional plans, but then also bring in some of your own, goals, and really, put them on paper. So I thought we just kind of start with a quick brainstorm. Am I doing this? I'm going to take notes, and you're going to. Okay, I'll pass it over to Emma.
Yeah, so I think we just thought it would be helpful, and maybe I'll back up a second to talk, just sort of give some examples of why towns make these checklists and sort of why they can be useful, though I think it sounds like you guys have maybe already thought through some of that since you're at the point of wanting to have one. But they can be just a really valuable tool to standardize the way that you make decisions about land conservation projects in a community. That can be really helpful when you communicate about those projects with other people. It gives you can point to the specific natural resource values that property is protecting, and you can also it really helps maybe justify the use of funds that might be limited to spend on a specific project. And I think it can also be a really helpful tool sometimes if you have to say no to a project. I think with land conservation, we sort of at least I can understand how we might sometimes feel like we just want to protect everything, but when we have limited funds, limited capacity, we have to sometimes make tough choices about where to spend those funds, and and some properties just don't protect the same level of natural resource value as others. And so when you have a standardized process like this, it's really makes it easier to say no to a project or yes to a project and be able to really justify that and have something to stand behind. I think, for people who might be questioning, well, why are you protecting this and that, it gives you something really concrete to point to, which I think is really helpful, and that's not always been the case. A lot of times, towns or land trusts will, or have historically protected lands that just as opportunity arises, and not necessarily being proactive and strategic in their efforts. And so I think more and more as we are, maybe dealing with limited funding and as volunteers with limited capacity, it can just be really helpful, a really helpful tool. And again, as Lynn mentioned, it's a great way to incorporate some local interests and values. So within a checklist, you could also weight how you score different criteria. And so it gives you a way to really put your own community's goals and interests, or use your own community's goals and interests to drive what conservation projects you pursue. So it can have a really nice local aspect that way. So I guess with that, does anybody have any questions about checklists and? Yeah.
Ellen pointed out, this is more like an update to an existing one. If you do have this ancient, and it's very simple.
Yeah,
But yeah, there has been some going on.
that's great. Yeah, and I guess I would emphasize that they can look quite different. I think the 3 examples you have in front of you are all similar-ish in terms of the level of detail, but we do have other examples, and it sounds like you have one yourself, of very simple checklists. So they can range quite a bit in how much detail they go into and what they include. You'll also notice that some communities choose to assign a ranked numerical score, so each category you assign points essentially as you go through and do the checklist. Other communities, so a good example of that is Rochester. They wanted a numerical score at the end, but then Chester, by comparison, doesn't have a score. So they didn't want to get sort of sucked into a number. And I think there's advantages and disadvantages to both of those strategies. I think sometimes, I think for some folks, if you just have a certain kind of way of thinking, having a score, you want to be able to say well, if it's over this number, then we know the answer is yes, and we're going to pursue this project. But I think sometimes having a score can be kind of difficult to explain. People, if you're sharing that with the public in a way, or if people see it in your minutes, they might be kind of confused, what does that score mean? Why does my property score lower than that property? So it's just something to be thoughtful about. And again, I think there's advantages and disadvantages to both strategies. Yeah, Cole.
I just think also, depending on what the pool of funding is that you're looking at.
Yeah.
You don't want to have a score high somewhere that they're not going to fund. That, if it is flexible and you can bring that to somebody that has dollars to give to you, that is not specifically for maybe that one location, that flexibility is really important to have in there too. Got to see where the money is coming from and how much is available.
Yeah.
Do the towns that have scores have a cutoff that says if you get above this, it's worth it, or if you, because I don't see that written on.
Yeah, I'll let Lynn. Well, so Lynn worked with Rochester, and I think when you stopped working with them, when you were done working with them, they hadn't yet come up with what that threshold was. So I think they're still sort of working through that, and there may again be some gray area there. They may not want to sort of set a hard threshold. So again, I think it's tricky to have a number because it can, but it also helps you having a number is a way that you could weight some of those criteria. So there's potentially, again, advantages to that too.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how
Yeah.
they weight it, like, you know, for agricultural resources, you can get a total higher score than drinking water protection.
Sure.
Which is,
Yeah, and so I think that's
So is
where
that
you
the
would
ci-
want to
that
like
city
make,
prioritizes agricultural land over,
yeah.
I guess you could,
And again, I think you'd want to make sure that if you were doing that, and I'm not as familiar with the Rochester checklist, because I didn't work directly with them myself, but, you know, maybe that was informed by like some public input, and so what's nice about doing this sort of at the same time as your master plan process is you'll have a lot of that public input that might help inform, you know, like, wow, everybody in town really cares about agricultural resources. That's what's rising to the top. That might be surprising over water quality or wildlife habitat or other things, but then you could decide based on that input that you want to rank that higher because of that local knowledge that you have. But yeah, so if you have that, but I think you want to make sure you have that information, and that's what's informing those decisions about weighting those scores. I think it's tough. If it's just the commission making those decisions, I think without sort of public input, I think that can be harder to explain, especially when you're coming up with like a number score and not just saying, yes, there's tier 1 wildlife habitat here or not. But yeah, so again, just all things to consider.
Seems hard to ultimately avoid being subjective with the number anyway.
Yeah.
Because it's ultimately down to the commission and the specific circumstances anyway.
Yep.
So, I don't know.
But again, sometimes it's just like having a number is a little easier in some ways. So, yeah, so again, that decision is ultimately going to lie with you all. But just it's nice to have those two examples to compare and sort of see two different approaches.
No, go ahead. I can ask you later.
Well, actually, if I could just kind of go back to the existing checklist.
So you have to
sorry.
step for that.
I wonder if it'd be worth just taking a minute and just like reflecting on how the current checklist that you have was used and what you like and don't like about that one, just to, I mean, I think it's a really good point. We want to just update what's there, right?
Sure, I can run through
There's-
it because I don't know if anybody else was here. I don't think so. Been here a while. So in 2002, we passed an open space bond, and the town created an open space commission, which was a separate commission than the Conservation Commission. It had members, of course, from folks on the different things. And the bond actually had, it was, I don't have the word, or maybe the wording is right here, but it was, yeah, so it was to protect the town's rural character and natural resources by conserving land for outdoor recreation, including athletic fields and other public purposes, which was sort of related to the school. At that time, we were in a pretty hot and heavy discussion about our school and building a school and having athletic fields. That was a very hot topic. And so the bond, even though I think a majority of the people working on it and voting for it, it was about protecting open space for the kind of the issues that we talk about. But so athletics was in there and the school was in there a bit. So so what we had for purposes was it had to be at least partially in Newmarket, because there was also a thing about you could fund projects outside your town, but for this it had to be at least partially in town, and presumably mostly in town. It had to either meet, protect the town's rural character and natural resources, or provide outdoor recreational athletic fields. Had to be in a goal in either the Newmarket Master Plan or the Open Space Plan, which is interesting because I think that came later, but anyway. And the property is owned by an interested landowner. So those were sort of the purposes checklist. And then the public benefits, we had athletic fields, we had drinking water, linkages and buffers, so conservation, wildlife corridors, recreational linkages, outdoor recreation for mostly trails, fishing, the other sorts of outdoor recreation, scenic views. And these were just check marks, there was no numbering system. Waterways and wetlands, wildlife habitat, working lands, so active agriculture or forest management areas, or some other significant public benefit. Other criteria, is there funding leverage? Are there any grants, outside funds coming to help with the project? Is there a donation opportunity, either direct donation or out donation or bargain sale, where they, sell it at less than the value. Is there a threat of conversion? Is it an immediate threat of being developed? So those are some of the other criteria. And then there was a feasibility set of questions. Is the property big enough to be significant? So is it like not an acre, a half acre or something that might not be that helpful? Is there contamination or cleanup costs? Would the land or easement be very difficult to manage or enforce if there's lots of abutting issues? Let's see, or adjacent properties, might they be developed that would diminish the value of this particular parcel? And would the landowner insist on certain provisions that would make it very difficult to meet the purposes for which it would be conserved? Are there any ethical or image issues? And I think those are most of them. So they were fairly broad, but they had to obviously meet.
Well, if we're
Some-
talking about to score, not to score now, is that what we're doing? And I'm sorry, this is out.
Okay.
But, Rochester's significantly larger. I don't know what their opportunities are up there. And if you have a lot of scorings, helps if you have competing opportunities. And Newmarket's opportunities, both Newmarket's opportunities and our funding, it's almost all grant stuff. So it's almost like for the few that come our way in a year.
A few grants.
No, properties.
Potential
Properties,
projects.
It's not like we've got 6 or 7 people, to look at, and who should we start with? So I'm not sure how the scoring is almost kind of useless. It's sort of like if you get all these checklist items that you want, but it's 22 years old, you definitely need to update what those components are that we're interested in.
Yeah, I agree.
There's a lot of new data, too, like this
Oh,
coastal conservation plan and other.
Absolutely, but the scoring was almost academic. It's just my opinion.
Just on the scoring part, anybody else have any thoughts on the scoring, using numbers or?
I agree. I'll reiterate, it just seems like there's not a way for the scoring to not ultimately be subjective. Most of these things are not is or is not criteria. There'll always be circumstances or personal feelings of the committee at the time that will weight them. So I don't think it adds a lot.
What's the alternative to a numbered system?
Well, if you look at the Chester one, yes, basically you check it, right? You check off the boxes, and it may be that you just have to have maybe you have some thoughts about that. If you don't have numbers, your criteria should be a little more specific in terms of whether you meet that category, maybe, or just more information with the criteria.
I think that is one of the things that you see in some of the more updated checklists is that it's very clear how to evaluate it. Check this reference if it's in tier 1 habitat block based on the updated
Right.
taking action for wildlife plan or whatever.
Conservation core area.
Yeah.
Some,
So I think that you could definitely do, and then you could decide if you put a check there or not, even if there isn't like a number assigned to it.
Yeah, I think I feel, as Tom does, is that if you look at the existing conserved lands and our developed lands, and what, at least for the coastal plan, I think our NRI will show some other areas and some different layers, but we have somewhat limited opportunities. So it's like, we're not going to have 5 projects like, geez, which one should we fund this year? We'll be lucky. That'd be wonderful if we did, but I don't think that's in our cards.
People use the scoring, because these are very specific, like, it's not subjective, it's does it abut conservation land, yes or no? They're not like, how do you feel about its proximity to other conservation lands? So it's pretty cut and dry, but do towns, like, are there smaller towns that have these that don't have competing opportunities that use hey, we gave the opportunity to score 50 points, it scored 49, and that holds more weight when you're going for funding than hey, we really want to conserve this, it scored 25 out of 50. You know, like, I don't know, because it's not a standard set that every town uses. If it were, it would probably hold more weight, but do you know if that score is actually used or provided to funding sources at all? Is it really just an internal go, no-go number?
And that's what I've seen, towns just use it internally, but go
Yeah,
ahead.
I think that's my sense too. It's primarily internally, it's like a go, no-go kind of assessment, and that, but I think the information you gather by going through the checklist gives you a lot of the information you would need to justify the project to a funder. You know, and again, you wouldn't, I think you're right, you wouldn't share that score with them, but you would say, it has tier 1 wildlife habitat, it's in a coastal conservation plan focus area, it protects public drinking water, you know, all these things that,
Or you could say, of our 10 top issues, it's known.
yeah, sure.
And that's sort of a score.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think, again, it depends where you know, to Colin's previous point, where the funding is coming from to, you know, what data you use to justify the project is going to be at play as well. But yeah, it's not, oh, yeah, sorry. You're right that it's not standardized across towns, so the score doesn't really mean anything to anybody outside the community. Sorry.
But I think you can use it in just like, you know, once you've gone through the checklist, right, then you know, these are the values that you really want to talk about when you're out selling the concept to a funder or to the public. So hopefully it does help you with the communication, but more like which values to talk about and how, as opposed to like the number.
Right, and that's how I see it.
Yeah.
The number may have value in that if you do actually take the public input that you mentioned before, like, oh, well, they decided through some public method to line these things up with scores this way, it does give you a way to evaluate it, like, based on public input, more so than just the feeling of the commission at the time. In case the commission changes out to a whole different group, you leave the legacy of, well, the people that developed this last year felt this should be higher ranked than this in the order of magnitude, so I could go either way on that one. Numbers or no numbers.
If I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so this is a perfect opportunity for the visioning session to understand what the public wants. So this is a 5-10 year period that, you know, is the vision for Newmarket. So when developing this checklist, taking in that, those comments, those visions from the community, and, you know, updating the checklist that way too. To help guide, you know, it's not just the commission, like you said, Jeff, making these decisions. It's actually a whole community process.
It looks like the,
Oh,
I
go
was just-
ahead, Ellen.
I was just going to say, it looks like the, at least the Rochester and the Dover, I guess it is, which both use points, and the Chester didn't use points, but the Dover and the Rochester, they specifically reference you know, the document, whether it's the coastal plan or master plan or DES or whatever, wildlife action plan. That seems really important, even if you don't use the scoring, is to say what the criteria is and then what are you using to ask the question, right? Like what piece of information or what map or. So would it be helpful for us to do a little bit of that, go through some of the criteria and see what people think is important from our perspective as a conservation commission?
Yeah, I think
know
that's,
With our land trust, for every property we look at, try to look at that as
The master, yeah.
that's great. Yeah, I think that's the direction we're
Yeah.
headed in this conversation, so if you
Yeah.
feel like we're there, then, unless, Lynn, did you want to add anything else, or I think,
Unless there's anything else that you liked about those 3 examples that you want to just make a note of, you know, in terms of like the style or the format or elements to include. But I agree, like, talking about the criteria is the fun part.
I think Rochester's very clear whether you use the scoring or not. I mean,
Yeah.
you can add that later, we could decide later
Yeah,
that
okay.
we liked it, but it's just so clear when you look at the
And exactly
the
what to do.
topic, the reference, and then what are some of the
Yeah.
yes, no's, or definitely not, or whatever the
And you can see
category.
at the end too, there's like some additional notes too about how they
Yeah.
would do it. Like anything that seems like a little bit squishy, they tried to like define.
I know, I just use Rochester as an example, and we can go through that one, each one, and say,
Yeah.
do we agree
Okay.
with that? And we
Yeah.
can just use their,
yep, that's great. And that's why we share these, that we can use them as templates to create the next iteration, so, yeah, that's great.
It's great to have a starting point too. And now you've got kind of your checklist and the Rochester example, and then kind of merge them. Yeah, do you want to go through
So,
criteria, Ellen?
yeah, I could
Okay.
just read them off, we can have a conversation. The first one is contiguous to existing conservation land. And then the reference is Rochester GIS as well as New Hampshire Coastal Plan Conservation Plan, I think. Is that the coastal plan? As well as their own GIS, is that? I'm not sure what that's saying, but essentially we could use the coastal plan.
The
because we
coastal
have-
plan or, yeah, that, you know,
Yeah.
the granite, that is the
Granite-
granite data set. So
exactly.
it's sort of one,
Yeah.
doesn't really matter which
So
one.
do we agree that we'd want to include that one, contiguous to existing conservation land? The- Seems like a good one, okay.
Alan, could you just number them, just say out loud what they are?
Oh, number one, sure, number one. And then, I don't know if we need to do all the parts, but one, the three conditions that Rochester used for that particular benefit, community benefit, is it directly abuts existing conservation land. You just check that. Or potential connectivity to existing conservation land, so for them that gets a lower score. And then does not abut existing conservation land. So obviously the first one and the third are easy. The middle one, it has to be some more analysis.
Or like part of a bigger kind of plan, like if
Yeah.
you're going to try to
Yeah,
connect, protect multiple places over a
Right.
long-term, long-term goal.
you could always,
Yeah, I mean, just yes, no, I mean, it'd be nice to,
Yeah.
Simple is good too, so.
yeah,
You don't
I'm
need to
feeling like
overthink it.
that middle part could be a separate question later on about connectivity,
Mm-hmm.
because we have that as a question for our community, I think. So let's, for now, we can say we're not going to include that middle one, but, okay. Everybody okay with that first one? Okay. So number 2 is conservation focus area, again, from the New Hampshire Coastal Plan. So that would be, it would be in the purple or pink or whatever color that is to you when you look at it. So their conditions say includes land identified as a conservation focus area or adjacent to a conservation focus area. Or meets none of the above. Are we on the yes/no tract? Is that our preference? In or out, okay. But we like that, obviously that would be one of our criteria, the coastal plan.
Do you know if Rochester is just, when they say adjacent, does that mean like the parcel is adjacent to a parcel that has it? Or it's like, do you know what they meant when they said that? Just out of
Like, is
curiosity.
it adjacent to a like priority area?
Is it like,
I mean, you can imagine our property just has like a little smidge of priority area and the rest isn't, that kind of scenario.
Consider like a buffer to the priority.
Yeah, yeah.
I kind of like the way Dover words it a little bit more in detail, in close proximity to existing conservation land versus abutting or, adjacent. And they give a definition for proximity, meaning within a quarter mile or no more than 2 parcels between the subject parcel and the existing conservation land. It's better defined.
I think that gives, that actually adds more potential land, right? Because it doesn't have to be right next to it. I think the difficulty we're going to have in Newmarket compared to, say, Rochester and Dover is we're quite small geographically compared to those two towns. And so if we start saying things that are somewhat half a mile, that's like our town. So I think we have to be probably a little more restrictive, otherwise, obviously, we're not going to get any support for protecting the rest of the
I just
town.
think we would maybe want to define adjacent to.
I think it means it has to physically be abutting, right? So it has to be either, for the second question, it has to be in the pink. For the first question, it has to be adjacent to one of these green blotches.
Okay, because there's directly abuts, and then there's adjacent to.
Yeah, we're getting rid of the adjacent too. I
On
think
the-
we're
on
getting
number-
rid of.
on number 2?
No, sorry, not the, well, yeah, so number 2, the question is it in the pink? Is it a conservation focus area, or can it also be adjacent to the pink? Again, we're going to start getting into a lot of,
I understand I think I understand the reasoning though, because you might not directly abut it. There might be a sliver of a parcel in between, and you're like still only 50 feet away or 200 feet away from a high priority area, and we'd hate to see it not be conserved just because wildlife had to cross a driveway or a sliver, or a thin, long lot or something. I'm guessing that's maybe what they were trying to overcome by saying, that's why I tried to ask, like, does adjacent mean like it touches a lot that has pink on it, or it comes close to the,
Well, let's
you
leave a
know?
question mark on that one. We're a little uncertain on that one. I think as we go through, because there'll be other data besides just this, and we'll start to see if, we have to have some narrowing down of the town. It can't be the whole town, so.
Yeah, and I was going to say, like, keep in mind that each of these criteria are only one criteria in a whole list. So even if it's not in a conservation focus area, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to say no to the project. If it also, it could be like critical wildlife habitat. It could have any other number of features that you decide are just as important. So, but I think this is a great discussion. And as you go through the whole list, I think that'll start to sort of, you'll get a feel for that. But.
Definition of conservation focus area.
So,
The pink.
The pink.
yes, so in the
I know it's
coast,
pink.
yeah,
Oh, you mean,
What is it? Because I'm looking at this and the land out behind us is owned by us as the HOA, but it is conserved.
right, so it doesn't, so it's,
So it's
it could
pink.
be, the pink could be underneath there. So you have to put one layer on top of the other unless you have a transparent layer. So this is just showing what's not conserved that's pink. There might be pink under some of the conserved land.
Yes.
Yeah.
but the pink, I can tell you what the pink means, if that's helpful. Yeah, so the coastal conservation plan is like a plan just for the coastal watershed, where they took many different layers of data. So it includes the wildlife action plan data, it includes wildlife corridors, water quality protection, pollutant attenuation, so all these different things that are good, that you want to have on a property or that you might want to protect. And they did what's called a co-occurrence analysis, where you sort of layer those things up, and where in a place that has many of those different features, those are going to sort of rise to the top. And they do, and so they do a model and sort of, they draw a line somewhere and they say, okay, everywhere where it's like this much is overlapping and is important, and they defined those as the conservation focus areas, as places that really rise to the top in terms of potential natural resource value, that you might really want to focus your efforts in conserving. But again, I think it's important to note, this is like it's a model, and it's one tool, but it's a great place to start to, help narrow down some of the, like Ellen said, like where you have to draw the line somewhere, so.
Let me tell you one more thing that's probably a little confusing. So the data that was used in this map and the data so far that's been used in these maps that Jackson worked on is from New Hampshire Granite, which is the statewide database. And a lot of times the land that's open space or conserved, so conserved meaning, we have it, or the land trust has it, open space might be an open space subdivision. So that data is not very accurate for Newmarket. I found like at least a half a dozen open space parcels that are not on Granite, and so yours is not showing up on this map, but it is on my map that I made, so we'll get it in there. But so this, one of the things we have to deal with is this data is not quite complete in terms of conserved land. It's pretty good for the big parcels, but there's some other stuff that is not conserved. But anyway, the pink, if your land was conserved, you wouldn't see the pink underneath there. I mean, if it was shown on the map, your parcel. So we have to work with the data not always being complete, essentially. Yes. Hopefully at some point we have to connect on that. Yeah. Okay. Shall we move on to number 3? Agricultural resources, which is the coastal plan. And I don't think we actually had Pete map the agricultural land, so I don't think they show up.
I think you took those out, that's my memory. To kind of simplify that map.
To simplify the map, because we don't have a lot. There's like 2 places it shows up.
I would say, if I'm honest, that agricultural resources, well, or maybe there's a place, there are other checklists that use, ag soil. Either farm soil But I know I'm biased, because I'm not sure.
So, yeah, so that again is part of the coastal conservation plan map, and it's part of, it's again a model to, and it uses prime agricultural soils among a couple other features, but again, just to emphasize, that is mapping like potential agricultural areas, and it doesn't necessarily capture existing farms on the landscape, so I think, that's something important to consider, and you have that in your previous checklist is working lands as a criteria, and so, that's something you might want to, and they also have, actually, Rochester has in here too, is it currently a working farm? So, you might decide that like what the data that came from the coastal conservation plan isn't a good fit for that agricultural resources piece in Newmarket, and maybe it's more just a matter of where are their prime soils and where are their existing farms, or, some combination of those.
Just to point, Autumn, if you recall, I don't think we haven't had a soils map made yet, but we have talked about having a soils map made. I wonder if you could make a note to maybe on that map, if Jackson's going to make one, that he should show these agricultural priority areas that are in the coastal plan on that map. Would that be helpful to have it on that map rather than on this map? Just to keep the farm stuff on one map, so we have the farm soils, and then we have these agricultural priority areas on that. And we could also have the active farms, which as far as I know, there's one. It could be, but we need to see it on the map, I guess, is what would be helpful. Thank you. So we want to just put do we want something related to this, but we just don't know exactly what the data will be that we'll use? Does that sound reasonable? Okay. So that was number 3, ag resources. Number 4, drinking water protection. They have their own GIS system, but then they said NHDES. I think that's because DES maintains the data on where the wellheads and all the aquifers are. Is that? I think that's correct.
I think that's correct.
Yeah. I think it's not public data because it's public water supply. But we have that. We know we have it. I mean, our water department has it. So we also have an existing aquifer protection overlay district. We know where the source water protection areas are because Jackson did do a map for us on that. And we also have, so I think the source water protection areas include the wellheads as well as the larger areas, right? I think. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. So the 2 categories are, is it within the aquifer protection overlay, and or is it in a source water protection area? Is there anything else related to drinking water? And this doesn't say anything about public or private, so we want to, we do have some private community wells. I think we have a few of those, so those would be captured by this as well. Does that seem, can't think of anything else related to water. I think so, yep. We might put, instead of Rochester GIS, we would put our water department. Okay, next one, number 5 is surface water quality. So this, the different things they have are river frontage, whether it has surface water, so lake, pond, stream, river, or a wetland, or it has no surface water. Prime wetlands, because we do have prime wetlands in Newmarket, which is, that's a mapping exercise that we've done in Newmarket where it gives extra value to the really important wetlands. Typically they're bigger, but not necessarily. And Bart, do you want to just say something about prime wetlands?
Yeah. One more thing is maybe vernal pools as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, prime wetlands. I think, so I just want to have that conversation about wetlands. You know, I'm not saying that it wasn't great, but sometimes soils come up and, so understanding some are more valuable than others. So I don't know if that's something to consider, because if it's stationary rather than storage, maybe it's just prime numbers that we want to concentrate more on.
So you mentioned vernal pools, do we have data on vernal pools?
To look for it, but-
We have some old data.
Yeah.
We-
Well,
I
that
think-
could
yeah.
be something in the future, like a goal.
Yeah.
Like maybe mapping.
We could have a student map those. Just as a note, before, under number 10, they actually have vernal pools as a unique ecological feature. So it could be there or it could be here, but also wondering about floodplains. Those are really important for us in Newmarket, so. The salt marsh, yeah. Mhm. Yeah. And floodplain is FEMA data. And salt marsh, prime wetlands is, do you want to just mention that we need to update the prime wetlands maps?
We're in the process of looking for funding opportunities to update the map. So, yeah, no, it's been a while since 2003 maybe. When Mark was there.
Maybe in 2006 or
Yeah,
something.
we were in there, so just want to make sure that's updated. Moving forward, so.
Does that redesignate them at the state level too? Does that change?
Right.
So do you have to go through the whole process?
Mhm.
Is it-
Yeah, we'd have to readopt, and they would, yeah.
The local municipality adopts it. So they have it delineated with that, and then we have to go through the process to get that.
Right, because it's different state criteria now, I believe, than there was in 2003 as to what you could adopt as a prime wetland that might be less,
We could
afford
add-
less coverage.
Yeah, we could ask Mark or even Barbara Richter at NHACC, because I know they got rid of the whole prime wetlands. I mean, we already had it, but then they got rid of it at the state legislature, but then they brought it back, I think, that you could now do it again, right? Is that?
Yeah, that's why we were in the middle, so that's why there's no state coverage of our prime wetlands.
Yeah.
It's just a local
Yeah.
buffer. There's no state
Mhm.
buffer for the prime wetlands in Newmarket. That's just say if the law is different, are we actually re-adopting them under the new law? Or is it?
We still have it on the books, it's just more delineated. So we already have something in the wetland overlay
Right.
district. Ordinance there, so we want to confirm its location, and we haven't had it in, 20 years.
Yeah.
So it's more of that, just mapping them out. And we have that criteria that they are. Have to look into, again, a little more research into it, on the methodology, but, character existing time. That's something we just want to make sure that we have to read correctly.
Yeah, I was just curious if redelineating meant redefining
No, no,
and
redefining.
reapplying to this, if
So-
you change it.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's what we said. Can we keep our own, and then use that as the criteria, or do we change it?
I think we have another one over here that. Talk loudly. All right, I think we can, we'll move on. Okay, we just did surface water, that was number 5. Number 6 is wildlife habitat quality, so that's directly from the Wildlife Action Plan. So if you remember, I think Jackson did a map for that. This is an example. So this is the pink-green map, everybody calls it. And if you can see that, there's actually more wildlife. So the wildlife habitat stuff is not exactly the same as
And that one doesn't have supporting landscape on it, does
It
it?
doesn't have supporting landscape. So there's 3 tiers.
highest ranked New Hampshire, highest ranked in our region, and supporting landscape. So do we want to include all of that?
Yes,
Okay.
that was just me.
All right.
I'll
And I'm
second
not
that.
voting. Yeah, the two non-voting members here.
Oh, you are? This is all consensus of this. Okay, number 7 is wildlife corridor. We haven't really looked at the wildlife corridor.
I haven't looked at it for Newmarket. I will say it's included as one of the factors in the coastal conservation plan, so it's somewhat captured there. But, I mean, do you want me to talk about what that data represents, or what? So the wildlife corridor map, New Hampshire Wildlife Corridors map, is a newish tool that was developed by New Hampshire Fish and Game. Again, it's a model, so keep that in mind. And so what it shows are these sort of like critical wildlife habitat blocks, and it's basically anything bigger than 50 acres that's in the Wildlife Action Plan as Tier 1 and Tier 2 habitat is going to show up on that map when you see it as a dark green blob. So there's all these sort of like dark green areas on the map that are then connected by these orange corridors. And those corridors show the areas where wildlife are likely to move across the landscape, again, based on a model of looking at how several different species of wildlife tend to move across the landscape. And then they also did this separate analysis of like landscape permeability. So like how, like, is there a road there? Is there a house there? So kind of taking some of those things into account. And so it puts those sort of two things together and just sort of put on the map these lines that show where wildlife are most likely to move. What's important to keep in mind about that map is it's not necessarily showing where there are known existing wildlife corridors. It's giving you like a place to go look and consider that might be good wildlife corridors. So you definitely want to do, so one thing that I would say is just like a little tricky about that map is you'd want to use some local knowledge and ground truthing to check those areas. So without having looked at Newmarket's map specifically, yeah, I don't have a lot to add to that, but I think it's definitely something to take a look at and to consider whether it's worth including based on what's shown in Newmarket. But then again, like you all have some sense of where some of those corridors are, like Turtles crossing Ash Swamp Road, so, and other areas. So you definitely want to draw into that local knowledge as well. But it is a great tool. We don't have anything else, like that maps potential wildlife movement. And it might also capture corridors that we just don't know about because we don't always see like where fish are moving across the landscape the way we see turtles because they get hit so much more frequently.
Shall we I can actually grab that and email it to everybody later. We can grab that map off as well. So we'll send it out and see if we want to include it. So question
Along
mark.
the same lines, would unfragmented forest be more helpful?
So again, one thing to consider is like
thing.
unfragmented forests are included in both, would be included in both the Coastal Conservation Plan and the
Right.
Wildlife Action Plan
Okay.
analysis. So
Yeah.
you're probably capturing that
I
by.
think we're getting some duplication,
Yeah,
that's what I'm
yeah.
getting at.
Yep.
All right, the next one that we have is public access, number 8. So their categories, this is a discussion with stakeholders. Unlimited public access, gain of public access. Okay, so I guess if you did the project, you would gain public access. I think that's what that means, or there's no public access.
This is like, a conversation with
Yeah.
the landowner.
Yeah.
This is also, excuse me, what are you trying to protect? Is it like
Yeah.
wildlife corridor? Then
Right.
maybe not more, as much, I don't know, public access.
Can
Is
we
it
hold that
more-
one as a separate, like later to talk about, because I think
Yeah.
that's a different category than some of these other features. Does that make sense? We'll hold that till later.
There could be, there could be another category that's just like things to consider
Yeah.
Not necessarily like a yes or no, but just like, you should know that, right? Like,
Right,
and
for sure.
use it to kind of tell the story of the property.
Scenic views or along roadways or trails or waterways. So theirs were extensive views, some views, no views.
Pretty.
I know, I was gonna say, that feels very subjective to me,
Newmarket's
too.
gorgeous. Yeah, maybe that one we hold too, I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of in the same vein as the last.
Yeah.
I would just say, I think when I heard other towns talk about scenic views or include them in this kind of criteria, it's interesting, this feels like a little more expansive to me, but I often think of like, or I hear towns talk about like, oh, that one view when you drive into town, you know, like, I hear people talk a lot about, it's in Durham, but on 108 when you're driving from Newmarket to Durham, the property there that got conserved by Seld a couple of years ago, you know, that like field view from the road that everybody really associates with town. It's
Well,
hard to define what those are,
Well,
but
there are scenic byways
Yeah.
designated, and sometimes like some very pastoral scenes on a scenic byway, you know, that's coming into town is important
Yeah.
to protect.
but I think it's, yeah.
That's also kind of part of what we're, preserve the rural character.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
and so that kind of goes with the view and the scenic byway.
Could we put that down as something to do at the public, open house, to have
That's a
people
great-
comment
yeah.
on scenic views? I think that would be a good question.
That's
for
a
the
great way to
public.
engage,
Yeah.
get people to,
I mean, my scenic view is where I walk my neighborhood, so I know
Yeah.
where mine is, but other people's. All right, cool. All right, let's move along, we've got lots to do here. Unique ecological features, they have vernal pools, they have exemplary natural communities, which are plant communities that are identified by the State Natural Heritage Program as being exceptional examples. And you would get that data, typically you get that from them with permission from the landowner. So but is there anything else exceptional that we potentially have both vernal pools and exemplary natural communities in Newmarket?
And if you were to, you know, the unique natural features, and there's like, for example,
Yeah.
it means there could
You
be
could
something
just-
else. that
yeah,
you're
you don't have to
thinking
name
of,
them
some
all right
weird
now.
Rock formation, or some waterfall, or something.
The highest peak in Newmarket.
Yeah.
Could it be like, could it be, because you mentioned natural heritage, I mean, could it be known reportings of
Yeah.
ranked species?
I would think getting the natural heritage report would be,
Right, so that
Something
would be
needs to
the
happen.
reference that we put in there.
I'll say too, some communities also have like unique cultural features too.
mhm.
Rochester actually felt like that wasn't a priority, and so anyway, sometimes it would seem like unique ecological or cultural features, and then it could be,
Oh, yeah.
an artifact or a old indigenous sort of artifact that's there. Yeah, stone walls.
I'm just wondering if at the workshop you couldn't find out where some hidden vernal pools are by asking.
Yeah, totally.
I don't know all where they all are.
And, you know, I'm imagining too that this is a situation where somebody approaches you and says, I'd like to conserve, is this of interest? And then you could go out and visit the site and ask them these questions, even if you don't know where they all are, you know, preemptively.
Yeah, so Dover also has historic or cultural site structural feature. Do we want to add that to ours, or is that a different chapter, different criteria? I mean,
So archaeological,
I don't know. I don't know who else
historical.
would do this checklist except us, so.
So
Should
are
we-
you saying in 10 you would add natural heritage report? Or something like that?
Pardon?
Natural heritage, so like, are we saying in number 10 we would add something like
That would be the,
unique species?
that would be one of the references, would be the New Hampshire Natural Heritage Bureau report. It would tell
Yeah.
you if there's a rare species on that property.
Okay, so, okay, I gotcha,
Yeah,
gotcha.
but you can also get, so you can't, so I don't know if people are familiar with it, it's, because it's rare species, you can't just go and find out what's on a property before you get permission from the landowner, but we can get a printout for our whole town. We won't know exactly where those things are, but we would at least know if those things are in our town. We might be able to figure out where they are based on what the species are, but, so that's helpful, but that would be one of the data sources. Yeah. Yeah. And I think the New Hampshire wildlife sightings, that all goes into Natural Heritage Bureau, or
Yeah, I
not?
believe so. Yep.
All right, So I guess before, because some of these other things are a little different, do we want to add the cultural, historic?
Yep.
Do we add that as a
Yes.
category? Yeah. And, let's see, what did Dover do with that? They just had several such features, one such feature, or no feature. So we can leave that open for now. Okay, good, we're gonna add that one, so that would be number, for now. All right, so the next ones they had funding leverage, discussion with stakeholder. This is number 11 on the Rochester. Funding leverage associated with project, potential funding leverage, no funding. Well, the no would be don't do the project.
I think that was meant to capture like a property where they thought would be really competitive
Yeah.
in going after,
Right.
grants or getting a land trust involved.
Yeah,
You don't always know
Yeah.
at the beginning of a project, but
yeah, we definitely had that one on our earlier
yeah.
list. Funding leverage, the ability of the town or partnering organization to leverage additional funds to protect the property. Yeah. And we also had the original one, which was donation opportunities. So landowners interested in donation, bargain sale, or other scenario that leverages town funds. I think both of those are very useful. Do we add that one to our donation opportunities? Okay. So let's keep that one, okay. Development threat, project under immediate development threat, project under potential development threat, not under development threat. Yeah,
And that's a tricky one, right? Because, if the project really is under development threat, it's very hard to conserve at that moment,
yeah, although we've done it.
Yeah, okay.
Goes through the planning
Yeah.
process and then you buy it once they've platted it out.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
not fun, but
Potential is a really subjective word.
And
Yeah.
then that's the problem too.
Yeah.
And rules change, so even if you're like,
yeah.
technically this seems undevelopable, it doesn't have enough, road frontage, et cetera, but then those
Yeah.
rules can change.
We just had back in the day, we just had threat of conversion, the property is under immediate threat. I think everything else in town is obviously potentially developable, except, the things that are
Well,
only in
unless
water.
it's underwater,
Unless it's underwater.
but, I mean,
Yeah, even then,
it-
stilts,
Particularly dry
all
year.
right.
Undevelopable as a check mark,
Yeah.
which is, again, hard to determine, but we
Yeah.
have some properties that were not developable because they're underwater.
Mhm. We can put that and see if we can, what that would, we'd have to define that, see if we could.
What's that, just like,
If it's not developable, is that a positive criteria?
Or no.
Or negative?
Because
Yeah, like
you
it's,
have to conserve.
right,
yeah,
I
that's
know.
what some towns say, and I think that's very much a judgment call,
Yeah, all right, we'll question that
but keep something above immediate threat.
now. Okay, property size, let's see, they have for Rochester, number 13, conservation value would not be diminished if adjacent properties are developed. No, conservation value would be diminished if adjacent properties are developed. What do you think about that one?
I think you cared, like you said, if it was just like a half an acre, it wouldn't really matter.
Yeah, what we
much.
had was the property's not large enough to be significant for its purpose.
Yeah.
Which is
What are the
sort of
other-
nice, because it's specific, but they can give you a lot of little
Yeah,
too.
I'm not sure, yeah, I think that fits us more than,
Yeah.
okay, so we'll have property size, but we'll use what we used back in.
Yeah, and I like what you guys have written too, because I think sometimes there's projects that might have like a really high community importance, but they might be really small, so it might not seem like, like sort of your traditional conservation project, but I can't think of a good example. But if there was a property,
No, we have lots of small properties that
Yeah.
are very valuable in
Yes,
town, that
yeah.
are super small.
right, so I think,
Yeah, rustic.
yeah, that's it. Leaving that a little bit
Yeah.
of flex, I mean, I guess Rochester's doesn't give an acreage or anything either, but that also feels a little subjective.
Aligns with, moving on, number 14, aligns with master plan goals, the natural resource chapter, which is what we're working on. Projects aligns with goals, well,
it does or it doesn't.
it does or doesn't, yeah, we know it's everything. Okay.
I mean, in your case, you're developing them side by side.
Yeah, right,
Rochester's at least
right.
basic,
Mhm.
times weren't aligned.
Okay,
So hopefully this just rolled right into your master plan as the way of
Yeah.
like representing your.
I was gonna
your
say,
goals.
like,
Yeah.
these kind of are our goals.
Yeah.
I know.
Right? So
It
I
seems
don't
like kind of
think
a
anything-
weird criteria because
Yeah.
we're kind of checking ourselves off for being a good student. Maybe we'll take that out.
It's like the given one, right?
Yeah.
Made my bed.
Yeah, get at least 1 point. All right, 15 is stewardship. Project does not present stewardship challenges, project presents stewardship challenges.
You've had a number of those things in your original.
Yeah, we had a
checklist.
bunch of stuff. We had, the
Hazardous.
properties are irreparably
Stuff.
contaminated or the cost of cleanup is too high. That's because we have had some places, a few places. Or it'd be very difficult to manage or enforce. So we could have like a few categories, we might have a few categories.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Dover has climate change impact specifically on theirs, so they kind of looks like they drew it out more than just saying stewardship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I think that's pretty useful. This property is about 70 properties or about 2.
Yeah, okay. So we'll have something with that, we might need to draw that out a little bit more, for what it means, okay.
The lines with master plan goals is interesting because you create conflict between different chapters by serving a piece of property. Right?
Especially if it's a donation, a partial donation, it has to meet some public purpose, and you find those public purposes in the master plan for town. So maybe not a criteria, but it would have to be something how in the purposes or something.
Makes sense to have a box to check in.
I don't know. We'll have to,
Need to tell someone, I guess.
I guess somehow we'll figure that one out.
So, one thing I'm noticing that's like at least mentioned in your previous checklist, but also just in working with you all through a couple of these projects, have heard trails come up quite a bit. And so just noticing there's nothing in the Rochester one about like outdoor recreation. I mean, there's the public access piece, but I think you have in the previous one something about outdoor recreation.
Yeah, we should
And it
definitely
seems
have
like it
the
would
trails.
be worth including there. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, another thing to consider, I'm just talking off the top of my head based on your comment about like the different chapters of the master plan, but also based on some previous conversations we've had with Ellen and Bart. Another criteria to consider too is like proximity to how, like maybe thinking about like trail linkages or like, is this going to provide access to trails from a developed area to provide more access to conservation land. Maybe that's like a connectivity piece, or maybe it's in the trails piece, but yeah. Just something
Yeah, I
else
think
to-
we could have also, we could have, because we've talked about from downtown to out, spoking out from downtown, and we want to connect to different towns too, so neighboring
Yeah.
town connectivity. And then there might be small connector trails that even
Because in those cases, property that's close to development might actually make
Right.
it a positive instead of having it be adjacent to bigger
It's a different
conservation
purpose,
land.
a
So
different purpose,
just
yeah.
something else, a different way to think about it.
Okay, does anybody see anything from the other towns that we might want to add? Talk about? I think I want Dover, likelihood of success, surveyable and no outstanding family issues.
I think I see that in like Barrington. Another town also had something about like something about how easy it is to work with the family.
Yeah, this is great. So,
Opportunity for, you know, it kind of falls into these priority areas like opportunity for marsh migration.
yeah, salt marsh migration. I don't think we specifically,
You know, and especially if it's going to checklist route, I think those are super quantitative, it doesn't hurt to put those in, right? Because it's like a clear articulation, this is something you
Yeah.
look for, the checks, you can then talk about it as a value.
maybe we should do salt marsh as a separate from this overall surface water quality. We could have salt marsh and then have salt marsh, but also salt marsh migration. Because we have a map. It's in the water resources chapter. It shows where that is.
Marsh and marsh migration.
Yeah. Let's see, what did we have before? Yeah.
For that reason, there are some funders that are keen to help with, we're finding a good landowner. Right?
Okay, that seemed good so for our first run through?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's great.
Yeah.
And in terms of next steps, I think, I'm offered to kind of be the one to kind of type up some notes
Nice.
and kind of take a first, the next step. And
Awesome.
but there could be, I don't know if you want us to maybe review it before it comes back to the group, or if there's like a, couple people who want to see a draft before it comes.
Yeah, do we have, maybe, I know we could do two or three people, I think, from the commission would be allowed to do that?
Yeah,
Would be
so-
allowed to do that via email, Mark?
Yeah.
Probably do.
Say two, let's be safe. Two or three. I'll look up the quorum. Just want to create
We have 7 members, so 3 would not be a quorum.
three would be fine. Yeah, 3 people. Volunteers.
Anybody that's particularly interested in reviewing these before we see them at our next meeting or some future meeting? Okay, great.
Okay.
Julie, all right.
Great.
You want me to?
Yes.
But sometimes people hear differently, like just hear the discussion a little bit differently, so it's
Yeah.
nice to get that.
Great, thank you for, yeah.
Cool. That was fun. I think we did more headway. Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, partner. Thanks the whole team and Ellen for keeping us moving.
Snap, snap.
Yeah, thank you so much. So the next piece on the agenda, and Ellen, I think I'll lay out a thought and then you can let me know how you want to proceed. The next thing on the agenda is to take a look at the draft goals and strategies, but I think this has a lot more refining to be done considering the actions in the water resource chapter, which need to be vetted for progress to this date, and also alignment with the draft checklist that I'll be doing. So I'm thinking in the next week or so I can pull together the draft checklist and revise this so that they're in alignment, or make additions or revisions where needed, and then perhaps we can review both together just to make sure that they're not in conflict with each other.
Although, the checklist is for a specific purpose of conserving new lands. The goals are for way beyond just that, right?
Yeah,
So-
I understand. I just mean more to ensure those priorities in the checklist
Priorities
are
in-
also reflected in the goals.
Yeah,
I had one note on goals.
yeah, I think,
absolutely.
can we go, I think we
Yeah.
should go
Yeah,
through
we
this.
need to
and,
go
Yes,
through
I
them.
would love to
Yeah.
hear notes if you have them.
Yeah, I'd like
Yes.
to hear everybody write input.
Something I thought might be a decent goal, I didn't see in there, and I think we do it already, but if there are to be changes in zoning around town, to try to get the planning board to work with the conservation commission to see if the zoning modifications align with the goals of the conservation commission and this portion of the master plan. And I don't know if that's, I know it's not required in it, but if it is a goal of the conservation commission to work with the planning board.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, is that a strategy or is that a goal?
I would say,
Strategy or goal?
I would say that's probably more of a strategy. I mean, a goal could be to, stay more connected to the town boards, and then the strategy would be, well,
How would that fit with
how is that done?
I think it's a great idea.
And I'll just mention something that Bart and I were sidelining about while you guys were working with Emma and Lynn, thinking about using the checklist for site walks and putting into the regs, having Conscom do those site walks and then report back to the planning board. Just something to think about as well.
For when new developments are coming forward?
Mhm.
Yeah, good. Like it. So maybe we just go, unless
Yeah,
somebody,
just
should we
go
just go through each
through.
one just to say, I mean, I think right now we're just talking about the broad topic,
Yeah,
so.
that's totally fine.
Protect drinking water seems sort of obvious, maybe. And that's already really well covered in the water resources chapter, which is fairly new, so that's what Autumn was talking about. You're going to pull out the key stuff
The
there.
actions, yes, into this.
Restore waterways, so this is the culvert, stream crossings, you know, restoring stream flow, working with and maintaining natural buffers, floodplains.
Well, so if this is restore waterways, we have protection goals under that. So
Protect
would
and
this be
restore?
protect and restore?
Sure. And some like we have, so yeah, so it could be that the protecting wetlands and buffers and so on could go down below, but I don't know if it matters right now, just as long as we capture the overall idea.
Okay,
Yeah, we can think about reorganizing.
because you've got waters, protect waters, I guess.
Like Moonlight Brook is under this.
And wouldn't you also want for protect and connect priority lands, should we include a bullet for the stormwater runoff? I mean, stormwater runoff has more to do with, has to do with more than just drinking water.
Yeah, I think, yes.
So I would like to see stormwater underneath the protect and connect priority lands and water. I'm sorry?
Improve the infrastructure, stormwater infrastructure, along those lines.
Yeah, I mean,
They're impairing the waterways.
no, I understand, well, I mean, the same bullet that's up in the drinking water, that just says prevent, which can include whatever.
Yeah,
Infrastructure or, you know, riparian buffers, and
That's true,
I guess that would be infrastructure.
yeah.
I should have mentioned at the beginning, there is a revised version in front of you. Or should, yeah, I think it might be under your, somewhere in there. So it's slightly different, there's a couple more
Okay.
additions, but.
Sorry about that.
No, that's totally
Didn't realize
okay.
it was changed.
Totally okay. I wanted to make sure I included the recommendations of the previous plan in it as well. So that's
Oh.
the additions and slight shifts in
Yes, it's quite
organization.
different.
So in that one, I had put the stormwater action under restore and protect surface
Okay.
waters and wetlands. But yeah, we can certainly strategize where things fit best once we have the content down.
All right, so yeah, so now we're protect and connect priority lakes, lands, and waters. Essentially, so far, just some strategy, so you're going to flesh that out some more.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, definitely requires more refinement.
Okay, revitalize urban riverfront. So this has the old riverfront and Shanda Park and
The fourth bullet in revitalize urban riverfront, I think I'd lobby to slide that to protect and connect priority lands and waters. It just seems better potentially placed than that.
what was that one, the balancing housing?
Yeah, I mean,
that one
anything
should be
built
up.
in the urban riverfront
Yeah.
isn't gonna be affordable housing, so
Yeah.
it just seems better suited and overall protect and connect priority lands and waters.
Makes sense.
I don't know if we can improve boat access anymore. We got a lot of boat access to both rivers. It might be maintaining the boat access?
Yeah, maintain safe and accessible.
Yeah.
On,
Oh, yeah, mine says maintain.
Oh, maybe I'm looking at the old one too.
I was
Sorry.
like, it kind of already seems like it's so slow.
I don't know which version.
on that note of boat access, do you feel like there's enough storage or, because I know in other communities, sometimes the issue is there's not enough parking or storage for people who don't live near the boat ramp. So
We've been
is
working
that
on
an issue at all?
Yeah, there's not a lot of parking we can change, but we have pretty good, I mean, again, we're a small town, there's only so much we can do. We'll talk about Sliding Rock in a little bit, but unless anybody thinks there's a way to increase parking. I don't think we need more boat launches, we have quite a few, both salt water and fresh water.
I think of that Sliding Rock would be to, maybe add more pavement close to the river.
Yeah.
Maybe to add more pavement because it's, around the edge of the
Parking lot.
the turnaround,
Yeah, I know.
cul-de-sac, or whatever you want to call it, and try to launch is like, it's all. I always have to park, half off the pavement.
Just make a note, I think Sliding Rock should be a strategy in there.
Okay.
Difficult site. Okay, sorry, I was looking at the wrong one too. Okay, move along.
No worries. So the next is creating trail networks. And I'll just plug an SRPC service. We have pedestrian counters that we, as you're a dues-paying community, we can come in and put you on our schedule to survey specific lands for usage as people walk the trails or different areas. And we also have traffic counters that can be utilized, in parking lots or things like that as well.
You set them up and take them away and do all
Yep,
the data?
yep, we do all
We
that.
ask you to do it for us?
Yep.
Okay.
It's our data team's favorite thing to do because they get to be out in the sun.
All right.
My only note on trails, and it is personal, being a horseback rider, without that, just other forms of recreation being included instead of just pedestrians and cyclists. I know it's not just me either. There's a new person who took over the farm on Grant Road with potential for boarders up, I think up to 12 horses there. And they are riding Grant Road to Hershey Lane and down to me as well on Neil Mill to get that trail access. So it's also, very unsafe for them to be.
That is gonna be
just
so
to-
scary.
It is, yeah. So just considering ways, that might make it safer to be able to not just walk and bike, but also have that included. We're
Yeah.
a small percentage of the town, though.
Well, I'm thinking about more like a multi-use because our roads are super dangerous. And we don't have much space to do anything with those outside the edges. So if there's a way to get landowner easements or find ways to connect
Yeah.
through backland.
I've considered myself talking to just a couple of butters because I'd like to be able to just get to visit the farm down
Yeah,
there.
yeah. Well, let us know what you find out.
Yeah.
The one all the way down there.
On Grant.
Like the Scottsburg.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It used to be the Arabian farm, it's Full Moon Stables now. Yeah, I know, she points to it.
Oh, what then?
Full Moon Stables. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, anything else on that? Do we have something about working with neighboring communities? Connectivity with neighboring communities, I can't remember.
I believe it's in the details somewhere,
Somewhere?
but I'll write down
Okay.
to make sure that it is. The second to last one is stewarding town lands. There's quite a bit in this one.
That land use change tax could go under the land, what do we call it?
It's just,
The land water conservation one. Because the money can be used for, it's largely
Yeah.
used for acquisition in the past.
I see what you mean. Yes. Protect and connect priority lands and waters under that one.
Yeah.
Any other comments on this one? And the last goal is expand education and outreach. And a lot of this kind of builds off of the things that you all already do.
We saw the master plan subcommittee, we saw Angie presented some results from the survey, which we'll see next time, I know. And, I mean, most of the people in Newmarket live downtown, right? I mean, it's concentrated, so my guess from looking at the answers to the questions, a lot of the people who answered the survey live downtown, which sort of makes sense, because that's where more people are. But a lot of people referenced going to Heron Point Sanctuary and Chanda Park, which indicates, obviously, that they knew about them and that they use them, right? That's what, and many fewer as you went further west out of town. And then there was another question about how much do you know about programming or information about town conservation areas, and there was a lot of people that said they didn't know anything or very limited. Now the question had both programming as well as just information, which I think is two slightly different things, because we do some programming, but more about information and sharing. But I think it points up the need to somehow connect the people where most people live downtown with what's happening in the rest of town. And so maybe there's something in some strategy we could include about that.
Marketing the rural areas.
Yeah, the suburbs, the burbs, the western
burbs.
burbs. Although I don't know if I want more people in the west.
Be careful what you wish for.
Busy on my street.
Getting very busy on that one.
Maybe some type of, like, road sign or something, like, you know, a lot of the scenic areas,
Yeah.
cities and stuff will have signs every quarter mile or whatever, you know, scenic byway kind of thing.
I know there was some talk about a logo or some sort of consistent logo for trail, so we could think about some. I know like Nottingham has a logo for their trails, not necessarily for an individual trail, like the mark that trail, but that this is part of the town-wide trail network, some sign.
And depending on how much we want to encourage people to get out there, you know, either highlighting a trail to check out each quarter, or something we put out there, like there's a QR code, go find, you know,
Right.
how much do you want to encourage use. I did a virtual walk once. I planned it for the other conservation commission I was on, and we had to go out and we had QR codes and there's different features you kind of stopped
Right.
at
Nice.
along the
Yeah, I
trail.
think there's a lot of things you could do creatively.
I love geocaching.
Yeah, didn't we find one under the bridge at the farm?
Was guessing. Was it Wigan or
I think
was
it
it
was a
guessing?
Wigan.
Along the boardwalk, too. Since they moved.
Sorry, you need to.
No,
No, these are all great ideas.
this is so good so far. Any other, I mean, I think people can send you stuff if they
Yeah,
have anything.
my email's always open to you, ascott@stratford.org. And yes, there will be another iteration for you to comment on in the coming week or two.
Like an hour or 2 hours and all the, and play them on.
Rather than having to go to the actual.
Turtle Talk was, and so many of those were retired.
Yeah, the invasive
I like
species
the
talk was really good.
plastic particulate.
Yeah. But I think wouldn't Tim just be able to clip that
You should
and
be able to put it
put it
and,
together?
Love it.
although it's sort of alludes to it in that utilize town media outlets and accessibility, you can do it.
Right, I know. Yeah.
Yeah, we can definitely make
We got
that
a turtle one
more
in March
explicit.
coming up, so it'll be a good one. Could have a beaver guy.
Are they gonna let him out, the beaver guy?
Yeah, it would be awesome. All right, what else we got?
All I have for you is just outlining my next steps.
All right.
So, Jackson, like I said, will be back next week, and he's definitely got a lot on his plate as he comes back, but Newmarket is on the top of his to-do list. So you should be seeing a near final version of the map set. And that reminder is just for the open space plan. We will be doing a full NRI map set where each resource has its own map, and then updating the water resource maps, and then filling in the gaps as appropriate with what else you'd like to see for the master plan chapter. So that timeline extends beyond the open space timeline a bit. And then I will revise the March 16th workshop materials to include some of the things we discussed tonight, thinking about scenic views and incorporating that. And yeah, I'll just ask that if you'd like to be involved in the planning of that, or if you'd like to be a facilitator, please just let me know. You can, shoot me an email, and I'll be sure to include you in that. And then I will draft over the next week or so a checklist, and I will meet with Ellen and someone else who I didn't see nominate themselves.
Julie and Melissa.
And we'll review that before it's sent out to you all. And I'll also revise these, or review this to ensure that the sort of priorities of the checklist are reflected somewhere in here. And then also adding actions where appropriate from the water resource chapter after meeting with Ellen and Bart and potentially other people involved in that, in implementing that chapter, to check where progress is made on the actions before adding them in here. And I think that's all I have for you right now.
Very cool.
Thank you. Thank you all
Thank
so
you.
much. Appreciate it. Stuff. See you soon.
Mm-hmm.
All right, is that it for you too, Bart? We're all set on the master plan stuff?
Yeah, I just encourage everyone to come to the vision meeting, March 16th. I'm not gonna, we think we found a venue, so we'll give an announcement once we get the confirmation. But really encourage you. I think it'd be a great opportunity for everyone. So tell your friends, tell your family. Let's get as many people as possible to kid friendly. We're trying to make it kid friendly, so we're really, we want everyone's opinion in town. So please mark that March 16th. More details to come when they develop. But yeah, that's all I got for the master plan. Oh, how does everyone feel about the title of the chapter? There's one thing that
We didn't talk about that
we
yet,
didn't talk
so-
about it yet. Everyone talk about it now, or?
No, let's do that.
Okay.
We don't do it.
Never mind.
Okay.
Carry on. Thank you.
Carry on, thanks.
Thanks, Bart.
We got too much stuff to do tonight. Moving along. Thank you both. My bedtime. All right. Okay, moving on to reports. Town council, Brian.
On the 17th, we heard from, I believe it was Sean or Lindsay, the pedestrian bridge going across the Lamprey River can be rehabbed for $277,000 for another 25 years. Keep in mind, we had found during the whole pipe thing under the water that the underside rusted, and it originally looked like it would cost close to $1 million, even more than $1 million. So this is a big, the fact that we can get it for 25 years with just this, we can save a lot of money for it, so that's a big, very lucky thing to happen. The town deliberative was on the 3rd. All of our warrant articles passed unamended. And at the February 7th town council, there's a proposal brought up to increase elderly exemption for taxes, or the amount people still in town get for it. If you're over 70 in this town and you have a certain income, you get a certain discount on your taxes. We were looking at possibly increasing that due to some residents bringing up the issue. It looks like it's something to be possible to do. We have a goal setting issue, and the town has a goal setting session on May 8th at 6. We also voted to get new water cover for the wastewater treatment plant. That'll help keep out algae, I think, and make it more efficient. That's it for me.
Great. Any questions for Brian? Just to note that one of the warrant articles is $75,000 or so for Moonlight Brook, studying Moonlight Brook to figure out where the contamination is coming from. So it's really important that we support that, something that's been important to us for Shanda Park. So that hopefully that'll pass.
What does the support look like?
Well, the deliberative session I went to, there were 20 people and nobody raised any issues.
All the warrant articles, I think, were fully recommended by both.
Yeah,
and,
I suspect if people vote, they're going to vote pretty much in support. Yeah. There didn't seem to be any controversy. All right, planning board, anything on your end, Jeff?
We briefly discussed the master plan at the less shorter, more consolidated was my take on that. There's some change. We looked at some changes to the site plan regulations, which Bart might be able to better explain if he so desires. They did not affect any conservation. There is a proposed project over across the street here, where the old train building is, the low brick building here. They're looking at 41 one-bedroom units over there. We consolidated a couple of parcels, and I'm a part of that technical review committee, and one thing that would be interesting conservation group would do that. There's going to be a fair amount of impervious area over there now, where, I mean, it's gravel, so the path is probably relatively impervious, but so what they're doing is and obviously right behind it is Moonlight Brook, so water would go off-site into that, but they're doing a underground infiltration basin that they're hoping to capture most of the surface water and water off the roof of the building and put it into this infiltration basin. But should there be a large storm and the basin is unable to handle it all, it would outlet towards Moonlight Brook. So we had some questions at the TRC as to how the water was going to actually make it from the site to the brook, but they don't feel like a lot of water is going to do that. So that's kind of part of it that I thought the conservation commission would be interested in. There wasn't. I think it's a little bit early to ask for input specific to the site until we see, the next iteration of the plan.
Yeah, this is 3 or 3, 5 year olds we're talking about.
Yeah. I was talking about the infiltration and how they're trying to capture the stormwater, not just send it all directly into the
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So they're still in the process. We haven't received an updated plan set, and the meeting's next week, so it's most likely going to be continued to the March meeting. So. There were some questions about that, as Jeff had pointed out. So we'll have more complete understanding of that once planning office, peer reviewers get those revised sets and analyses and understands completely how it will work and proven to work. So, yeah.
What would the timing be on the work over there?
The work in
That he was just talking about over by the old rail station. That's what I was thinking it was.
Yeah, so
there's a couple businesses there and the barn.
Yep.
There's the engineering firm over there. That lot is to be consolidated with the other lot where the old train building is.
Right.
And that building will be taken down eventually.
Yeah, it's all town land.
No, it's all private land. So where New England Barricade used to be, that brick building, that would be demoed along with that white building next to it. Those go, and then this building will replace it.
And the time frame can be a while because, like Bart just said, he doesn't have an updated plan set for the meeting next month.
Yeah. So it's again, for the permitting, it could be in the next couple months. The earliest the board will review it with the complete analysis, because also traffic is involved as well. I just got off a meeting today about the traffic analysis and, doing revisions with that. So, you probably see some sort of decision either in March or in April. And then it's a question of, when will it be built? Who knows? Financing these days and market conditions. So, if it were to be approved, of course.
Right.
So the
Yeah.
potential for 82 cars
I
in
think
and out
it's
of there,
61
in addition
cars.
to the 60 that are going in at the end of Grant Road.
Nope, so there's
Right.
30 at the end of Grant Road, and then this one, I
And
think,
So only one car per unit
Yep.
in Grant Road?
that's correct.
Yeah, this was not 2 cars per unit, it was, I
One
think it
car.
was 60, and some of those, not dedicated, but there'll be dual-use spaces for commercial. There's a downstairs commercial space
Right.
on the lower level of the building.
So it's 41 units, and then that commercial space, as Jeff mentioned, and so there'll be that dual usage, like, when they go home at night, that could be used for visitor parking and whatnot, things like
Can it
that.
include the train station?
What's that?
Can it include the train station?
The train station? I wish, yeah.
Train stop?
Yeah. I know.
Put that in the master,
Transportation.
Yeah.
put that in the master
Let's
plan.
start with buses first, okay? Let's bring the buses.
All right.
I'm gonna just mention, I don't know if there's anything in there, Mark, that you'd like to address with the board, or the potential changes to the site plan?
Yes.
I don't know if anything specific.
It kind of does. Going through, been here for 2 years, the way the review process for the planning board, I think, is a little backwards. In that, not to say it's the wrong approach, but I think it could be a more efficient approach, is that the technical review aspect happens after it's been accepted. The plan. So, when the planning board gets the application, they review, see if they see if everything's complete and you check boxes. And then, there's no technical review, you're just seeing if, the application has been submitted correctly and has all the information. And then you go to a technical review. So the idea with these revisions is to bring that technical review first. Codify the TRC, or Technical Review Committee, as a committee that will review for technical aspects of any site plan, subdivision, and whatnot. And then once it goes through that process, it goes to the planning board, and it's a more constructive conversation. You don't have to understand that everything from a technical aspect is probably conforming. There's some debate probably left, some room for debate still, but you're not going through revision after revision, as you currently do right now. So that's one aspect of it that we're debating, the planning board's debating, is putting that process first and then going to the planning board for review. So I think it could be a help, and then, that technical review committee could have someone from conservation as well. So, as part of that process. So, that's up to mine, so you can be advocate for those elements. So,
I guess to what you were saying earlier about having the Conservation Commission more involved in when developments come through, have some conversation.
We did discuss, that's one part of the ground, we bark for some part of this.
Yeah.
Definitely. Because it can be accepted and passed in the meeting, right?
That's correct.
So then there will be no opportunity to move it to get Conservation Commission input.
Right.
So we would have a conservation member, if we codify that technical review, you could decide what the membership should comprise of.
Right.
One member of the conservation.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, cool. That's good.
And there's a couple other things for the review that are more administrative as well. So.
Great, thanks Bart. Thanks Jeff. Riverfront Advisory, Shanna Park.
Yeah, I'll be incredibly brief. I think probably the biggest change, or the biggest thing I want to just say thank you, is the work Lindsay and Bart started looking at a little bit of parcel ownership and easement status and things right along the riverfront. Just trying to help kind of visualize where the town has rights, where we don't, vice versa, things like that. So very helpful to start visualizing that.
The only other thing is I know we're still working on the signs about don't feed the ducks.
Yes, yeah, so that's on my to-do list, working on signs. There is a working group right now, working on that verbiage. I need to try some comments, but that is on the docket.
That's good.
The docket. Yeah, on the docket. That's a good one.
Very good. All right, thank you. Any other committee reports? Move along. All right. Anything you want to say about easement monitoring, Tom?
Just real briefly, it wasn't all complete last time, but the hard copies have been put in the files and the electronic copies for the town hall are done. And there was a couple of follow-up activities on a couple of projects, and that's been done by Ellen and myself.
Very good. Thank you for that, Tom. And everybody who helped monitor. Super good.
Yeah, thanks for the monitoring.
All right, I know it's getting late, but I do want to cover a few things. Did people have, moving on to land stewardship, I can pass these around, did people have a chance to look at the kiosk interpretive panel? This is Kathy, who's done the other two. She's done Heron Point. She did Heron Point and Sliding Rock.
The only note or comment I had was literally in the first sentence
Yep.
to add the date or the year the town bought the land.
Oh, yeah, okay.
That was like 2003.
Yeah, I must have taken that out because it was in at some point, yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it shows something because I think sometimes people can get in their mind that like
Absolutely.
conservation is a thing that like, oh, well, that happened in the past. But it's like,
1920.
yeah, that wasn't
Yeah,
really that
yep.
long ago.
I think it was 2003. I thought, you must have taken that out. It used to be in there. I think it was 2003.
Pretty nice, isn't it?
But I'll check.
Yeah.
No, that's great. You caught that. That was in there. The only thing I had forgotten to add, include was when we did the Heron Point Sanctuary, we had a sentence.
Yeah.
I guess I wrote it. But it said, it was, you know how a lot of towns and places have land acknowledgement statements now? So the sentence that we have on the Heron Point kiosk says, and I'm thinking that we should probably add it to this if you think that would be appropriate. So it says, today, we draw on the wisdom of the indigenous cultures and our current understanding of the ecology of place to care for and respect these lands and waters. That's what we said on the Heron Point. So it's to, recognize the indigenous cultures, but that we also
You also said something on the Sliding Rock.
Do we have something different there?
I don't know, but there was something
It might
about
be
the
the same
indigenous
sentence. It's probably the
land.
same-
It may
probably
be the same
sentence,
thing.
yeah. I just forgot to include it, so I think she can put it in there on the space. All right, and we'll add the year. What else?
I'm a broken record on this, but I know that parcel you're allowed to, by ordinance, have dogs off leash.
Yeah,
And I know there'd be asked on the sign there.
Yeah.
Please keep dogs
Yeah.
on leash, so I didn't know.
It says or under control.
No.
yeah.
I read it.
The problem is we have to change it. So on that, so what do you think we should change what we say on the kiosk?
I think that does the old sign said during
Yeah.
nesting
at a period.
season, I believe.
Yeah.
Or nesting
What
season.
does it say now? Lost my version.
I just think that without
What this
backup.
says?
Yeah, what does it say now for,
Would he,
Without-
please keep dogs on leash or under control to protect wildlife and respect other visitors.
but it doesn't have the period where you definitely have to keep them out of the field.
Well, but I think that it gives you a little more protection from being called out on
Yeah.
saying, someone like me coming up and saying, this is an off-leash property, that actually is called that in the town, through the town. I don't know,
Yeah.
you can do
Yeah.
anything.
Well, I think one thing it brings up, not that we don't have a lot to do, but at some point, and maybe it's not in 2024, but there are a handful of town resolutions that become town code, that relate to town lands, and we really need to look at them, because some of them are old, and some of them, we should revisit the dog policy, there might be other things that we should really revisit, some of them are pretty dated.
Yeah, and if the commission thinks that people should keep dogs on leash, then we have to change the ordinance.
Absolutely, yeah, exactly. So I think we
Which
should.
is fine,
Yeah.
if that's what the commission wants to do, I just keep pointing it out because it's.
No, I think, we should just review them, because I don't know what people want, I'm not tied to one issue, but at some point we should look through all those. So we'll put that on our plate for later.
The other one I was
We
surprised
should add that
about,
to our master plan.
and I'm not like advocating tobacco use or, and I'm not a smoker, but I do notice that it says no smoking use, alcohol use.
Yeah, that's a town ordinance.
Is it?
Yeah.
In outdoor public space?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
The same with the, I think the
I know
dust.
alcohol is-
Yeah.
is no tobacco.
But, yeah, I mean, I think those are like, you know, somebody does it and it's, you don't want everybody doing it, so you kind of.
Yeah. I just, I never thought of an ordinance or a rule that says you can't have a cigarette in the woods. You know, that's all. Obviously, it's not wise to walk through the forest, but please don't do that.
I think that's what it's for. All right, so anything else? Sound good? All right, we'll move ahead with that. I'll probably have, oh, I got the thing right here. Great. Okay, it's getting late. Okay, let's see, I had a couple more things. Sorry for Wigan Farm. So we'll be moving along, and hopefully this will be done by Earth Day. And I'm hoping we can have a work day on Earth Day, which would be April 20th, Saturday. So if people can put that in the calendar, we would install the kiosk itself, which is going to be a simple, thanks to Jeff's idea, I think it was, not to have a roof. It'll just be like the entrance sign. It'll be like 2 posts and some horizontal. And then we'll install it, and we'll install the panel. And that will be done. Couple other things. The bridge, if you know the bridge, there's 2 ramps that are kind of steep-ish. And sometimes they're very slippery, particularly not so much when there's ice, it can be, but when there's mildew, they can be very slippery. And some places they put hardware cloth down on the ramp and you just tack it down over.
Are you talking about
The Wigan Farm, yeah, sorry, I'm still Wigan Farm. So if it's, I've done the same. And so we can get hardware cloth, and I think we just need like a 2 foot by 5 foot on each one and get some screws. And so we've approved $500 for the kiosk. I don't think it's going to cost that much for the actual construction. So if I can just use some of that money to buy that material, and then we'll just put it down when we do the other stuff. Is that okay with everybody? Then we don't have a vote. Okay.
Is that a permanent installation?
Yeah, they stay on, yeah. Yeah.
So there isn't a roughness that you can put on it that would stay rough?
This hardware cloth is actually, it's completely flat, but it works pretty well.
That's stuff I don't know.
Yeah, there's one, that's where I got the idea,
Nice.
one on the Greenway.
Probably will help hold it together when it starts to run.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's a pretty cheap fix, and, yeah, so it'll just be on the 2 ramps.
Got it.
And then I heard from Vic Bilodeau, who was a volunteer who helped us with the bridge construction. He lives out that way. He said there's a couple trees down, I haven't been out there, along the stone wall, along the trail. And later in the spring, he's willing to go in there and buck them up and take the wood out, if that's okay with everybody.
At Wigan?
At Wigan Farm.
Yeah, I saw
That's
that.
great.
Yeah, seems great. He's a volunteer. Seems
Yeah.
like he'll go in
He
there.
was the guy with the kids?
Yep.
Yeah.
No, not the kids. No, this was the guy with the saw who worked with Srini out on cutting up the wood. He lives right off Fox Hollow. So, all right, I'll let him know. All right, that's Wigan Farm. Sliding Rock. Hopefully really quickly, I sent you a proposal. Tom and I met with Tom Ballestaro, who's a civil engineer, has a company called Streamworks. He does and they don't want to do that unless we know where we would get the money for the actual work, which could be some sort of rain garden, stormwater management stuff, which Tom Ballestaro thought could be 40 to 100,000.
On top of the 20.
On top of the 20. So, my feeling is, it floods there, so anything we did to the beach and the ramp, it's gonna wash out again, and I feel like a lot of this is, it's also a recreation site, and so, and maybe engineering, DPW, other departments, issues, and so if you're okay, I was thinking of sending this in LRAC's, because LRAC had some good comments, just to the town, go to BART and DPW and engineering, and say, this is in recreation, and say, this is the information we have. If you think at some point collectively it should be done, then we could brainstorm some funding sources. But right now, we're just like, here's the information. Is that? Well, I think that actually you can go for up to 30,000 now.
That's changed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've worked with Tom a lot in the past. He does a great job.
Yeah.
And that sounded like a fair price to me when I saw it. But isn't it something we could do internally with the engineering capacity we have in the town?
It may be that Lindsay could look at it. It's a complicated site because it's small.
Agreed.
And there's runoff from the road, but we haven't looked at it with her. So that's one of the things I wanted to send us to her and say, this is what folks have looked at. Is there anything you can suggest that can be done much more simply?
Yeah.
Very small, as far as like burying drainage to move water somewhere else.
Well, and I was,
Quite a bit below the river level.
I can send you photos, but I was out there in the, we had the big rain, the 4 inches or whatever back in January, after the New Year. And it flooded the whole, all where the chiropractors, it flooded all the way up. And that wasn't even a super major storm. So,
Yeah.
I don't know, even your stormwater the rain gardens might flood. And so then, I'm not doing engineering.
Well, the parking lots and the road are all kind of set to drain towards the
Yeah.
boat ramp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a town value.
Yeah, I think it's a
For
town.
that,
That's-
for the usage and the value of it.
Yeah.
It's conservation fund.
Yeah.
And it's fungible for that.
Yeah, okay. Does everybody feel good about that? Okay. Hand it off, thank you.
Pass the buck.
Good, okay. So, let's see, Heron Point Sanctuary, a couple more real quick. Heron Point Sanctuary, another tree issue. The Heron Point Estates, which is the house, the community there that you go through to get into Heron Point Sanctuary, had a tree person out, looked at all their boundary. And apparently there's some trees on, I think they're on Heron Point Sanctuary behind, I think the person who lives right next to the gate. And they're worried about a couple trees there. So Lindsay and I are going to go out next Tuesday and look at those because we have to look at them to then see if we need to get an arborist to look at them. If an arborist says they're a hazard, we have to take them down. At that point, you are liable. So I'll talk with Lindsay because this is a recurring thing. We paid $1,000 for the tree out at Piscasset River Loisel. We paid, well, LRAC paid for it, but we paid $2,000 for a handful of trees at Sliding Rock. And so, Bart, I don't know if, I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but I'm wondering if, could there be a CIP thing for hazard trees? Because it's going to continue to be expensive for us to.
Budget line item.
For a budget line
Budget,
item
yeah.
for trees?
Yeah, potentially, yeah. Hazard trees you're talking about?
Yeah,
Yeah, I believe DPW's the warden. Yeah.
yeah, but I don't think it's very big, and so maybe we can convince the
Yeah.
town budget that we need.
I think
Because we
next-
can't keep paying for this out of the conservation fund. It seems a little bit unfair.
So I think next cycle,
Okay.
coming up, that's a conversation we can do. So it's something me, you, Lindsay, and
Yeah,
Rick can
okay. I'll talk to
discuss.
Lindsay about it next
Yeah.
week when we look at those specifically.
Good call.
Yeah, great. And I think last time you had mentioned the boardwalk had some issues. Did you relook at that?
Yeah,
or-
there's definitely sections that are rotting away already.
Okay,
That probably need to be replaced before the whole thing needs to be replaced.
Okay.
The whole section. So I think you can, I was gonna say, I'm around if you
wanna
wanted to
come
take
out?
a look at that on
Yeah.
Tuesday.
okay. It's probably going to be, I'm not sure, it's going to be maybe like 2:30 in the afternoon?
Yeah, check in with me.
Okay, because then we could take Lindsay down and show her that too, because DPW has done a lot of the repairs. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's been volunteers, sometimes it's been contractors, but sometimes DPW does it.
Yeah, I think even, if there were 4 or 5 of us that went down there
Okay.
and pulled off the old boards and put some fresh ones on, we could do it in a half a day.
Okay. Do we want to approve any kind of budget now, or do you want to wait until?
Yeah, let's wait and
Yeah,
take a look at
okay.
it.
Sounds good, perfect. All right, so we'll get you in there on Tuesday too. Excellent. Balch Brook, did you want to, do you have any opportunity, Jeff, or you want to move along on that one? Yeah, no, totally okay. All right. Okay, we are not going to talk about these property spreadsheets. It's 9:10, and I am not prepared to keep working on them. So, one thing I will say, I gave you hard copies. So these are 5 of our town properties that we steward: Heron Point, Scastic River Loisel, Shanda Park, Sliding Rock, and Wingham Farm. And we have about 6 others that are smaller that we also, we have Dearborn, and then we have a bunch of others, so I didn't print those out yet. But what I tried to do here was, each one's the same, and so the top is like routine annual stewardship that we should be doing. And then things that we might want to do this year, or if it's next year, whatever, put a year there. And then completed, I thought it would be helpful to really start keeping track of what we're spending money on to help not only future commission members, but also if we need funding, additional funding, that just tells us what we're doing and where we, who did the work and so forth. So if you can think about, I think it would be helpful if we each took 1 or 2 properties and helped, make sure the annual stewardship is done and look for other things we might need to do. We don't need to decide tonight, but think about if there's properties near where you live that you prefer. But I think if we each pick 2, and I will email you the other properties, some of which are like an acre or a quarter acre that we hardly look at, and one of the things will be just to actually go out and look at it and see what we should do with it, if anything. So, so just be thinking about that if you can. And if you think there's other things that should be added to the table, if you think you're missing, that would be awesome. Okay, I think that's all. Okay, trails. I just put trails as a category. I didn't know if you wanted to say anything about trails.
You also sent out a thing about leaf blowing.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, before we
Which
get to
fits
trails.
with
Well,
trails.
actually, it's a trail thing. So I think it came up last time that people talked about a couple of properties, people had leaf blowed the trails to make it easier probably to run. It's safer, but it's something that, I know Exeter had to put signs up once because people were doing that in Oaklands. And I happened to be at Mount Agamenticus, and they have a sign which I sent around. It's really like in fall, right? So end of summer, beginning of fall. Do we think we need to put something like that up, or what do you think?
Well, I have to say, when I was walking the Lozelle Trail, I ran into the guy who lives on whatever that
Carolyn
cul-de-sac
Drive,
is,
yeah.
who was raking it out, and he was adamant that he was going to do it because he likes to run the trail. So, I don't know, you could put up signs, that would be the first step in my mind. Put up signs and then see what happens. But I have a feeling he's going to do it. And, I don't think necessarily you want to get into a battle with one of the abutting landowners. But it's, our due diligence would be going out there and putting up a sign.
What if we, because at some point you get too many signs, right? It doesn't look nice, and it's just too many signs. It's like, don't do this, don't do that. What if we just periodically had it in e-news, when you do a Facebook, even social media, when fall comes? Does that sound like a better approach than more signs? Okay, I like that too. All right.
Totally ineffective.
All right, anything else on trails? All right. Do you want to?
Just quickly, I think the fence has been taken down, Bart, over on the Boulder Trail. I think the landowner, Tim Carpenter, plans on taking those posts out of there. I'll help him, and we'll get rid of the fencing probably after the winter. HOA will be happy with that, and then we'll relook at how much work we want to put into that
Great.
And how much manpower we have to do it.
That's probably nice to get that fence done.
Yeah.
Very good. The only other item I had, we had someone email and wondered if disc golf is a possibility on any town lands, not because they want to do it necessarily, but they just thought that might be an interesting draw for young people. All I know about disc golf is it does take a fair bit of land. It's like it's essentially like a golf course, but in the woods.
Is that ultimate frisbee, the same thing?
Yeah, sort of.
No,
No?
Different.
no.
It's very different.
Yeah.
Okay,
Not ultimate frisbee, no, but
Basically-
it's you throw.
Frisbee golf.
Yeah.
okay.
From what I know, I don't know that any of our parcels are big enough or varied enough to make it worth it. You know, I see it on the ski mountains and bigger properties with varied terrain. It just doesn't seem like ours would cater to the activity so well.
Also, I don't think this is our decision. If someone wants to set up a disc golf court in their yard or their land, fine, but are we suggesting that we make one ourselves for the town?
That was the question, and I mean, I have my own opinion. I don't think most of the lands that we've conserved are for other purposes or not at all for that kind of activity.
I don't know if you guys had said, like, can you guys make me a golf course?
Pardon?
Yeah, I know. Good point.
I would say that it would probably be well used, I bet. I mean, I've been disc golf, so. I do not think that it is, the resulting disc golf course through the woods is not aligned with the goals of the Conservation Commission. It's set solely to get people to use conservation property because it's relatively destructive to the natural environment. I shouldn't say relatively.
It is.
It's pretty
I
destructive.
went to.
Yeah, it's pretty destructive to the natural
You
environment.
kind of tromp through
Yeah.
wherever your
Clear.
disc goes.
It's a great
So it makes more
It
sense
is.
in places where you're right up a ski mountain
Yeah.
or bike
Yeah.
Or
trails.
a piece of land that's conserved for that.
For that, yeah.
Yeah.
I could see that happening. That would be great.
Yeah.
The conservation.
Recreation land versus
This is
conservation.
not our purview,
Yeah.
it's like if someone, this is not us,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's, but yeah, this isn't really us.
Pass it.
I always thought in
No
Durham,
pun intended.
you know, stuff in Durham would come up when I worked for them in like certain mountain bike trails.
Yeah.
And I always said, well, you know, that's fantastic if you can go find a piece of property, like work on buying that or creating those. I mean, it's awesome. All these activities are fine, but you have to find the piece. You can't retroactively put it on somebody's land, so. But anyway, that's important. You know, somebody asked, we need to think about it, but that's great input. I will get back to them on that. Anything else? Motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to
All
adjourn.
right, second?
Second.
All in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
Marcia.